I want to talk about what has changed. Okay, what has changed in recent years with how misinformation spreads and how it affects people's health decisions? Krista, let's start here.
I mean, what hasn't changed seems like a better question, because with social media, AI, all of these things that are changing in the world, there's just an onslaught of fire hose of information available to you. In the past, if you had a medical question, you wanted advice, you would call your family doctor, you would call your medical team and be able to get an appointment. We don't have that luxury anymore, and so people are looking for information everywhere, and it is all over the place. So that's, to me, the biggest change, is that we get our information in different spots.
Yeah, a polluted information environment is what we often call it. Sam?
This might be hopeful or it might be sad, but misinformation has always existed. From when Jenner was trying to create the first smallpox vaccine, there was propaganda in the newspaper that it would turn people into cows. And so it's always been around. What feels different now is the scale and the speed, as Krista alluded to, and how fast it can spread. And the way that, we don't have social media platforms with news feeds, we have algorithms that are trying to drive engagement, keep eyes on a platform, which means increasingly polarized ideas that rage bait, that cause engagement. Those are what are gonna occupy our time, by definition, by how they're created. And so it's giving this polarization that makes people think more about ideologies and these like bigger things instead of the actual science. And it's really easy to sidestep the evidence that might be in front of you because you're clinging to this bigger ideology, because that's how we're interacting online. And so that, to me, is a societal shift in addition to the speed due to technology.
Yeah, the technology has definitely changed. Megan, you're covering this.
Yeah.
Why are bad or misleading health claims so convincing? Like, even for educated people, because I have people like sending me stuff, I'm like, what?
I think that's the million-dollar question, and why we're all here to talk about it. Why are they so convincing, and how have they become so convincing? I wish I had a great answer for that, but I think we, as a storyteller myself, these other folks have figured out how to tell stories and to tell them really well and quickly and grab your attention, and we're all keen, or like we're drawn to that. And so what I do in 1,000 words or 500 words, people have figured out how to do in 100 words or 50 words, or even just like cute little messages, and we're drawn into that, and we want to believe it in a time when it's hard to know what to believe. I don't know if that makes sense. I wish I had the answer.
I mean, if you're not constrained by the truth, you can write a much better hook, you know?
This is true.
Right.
That's true.
So in some ways, I mean, with this changing world and the fact that people have so much access to putting out their own voice, putting out, non-evidence-based medicine, in some ways, have scientists, the medical community, public health, have we failed to deliver on compelling stories on the evidence-based side?
I don't know if we've failed. I think that the people who are doing the telling of the stories are often not trained in this. I spend a lot of my time training researchers and trainees and scientists how to tell these stories, and it's not part of what they're given it's not part of the education they receive. So they can be very stuck on the idea that they have to explain everything, that they have to give every caveat, that they have to be as accurate as possible. And it can be a really hard job for me to come in and be like, hey, you can be compelling and still be correct and still get the message across, because it's not how we train the people who are doing the healthcare and science.
Megan, do you find that when you're trying to find experts for your stories?
Yes, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about today. And it's something that I've seen that's magnified over the last 5 years, and probably more so from the pandemic. Before, if I had a question about a particular study or an expertise, it was quite easy for me to find an expert to want to step forward and explain their expertise, or be quoted, or come out strongly for or against something, or tell me what the nuances or concerns were. I've felt like in this age where everyone has a voice and this voice can be magnified, scientists or experts or doctors are sometimes hesitant to come forward and say, well, I'm not really sure. I don't know if I'm the right expert. I wish there was more information or more evidence before they step forward. And what I found, and what I often say is, like, if you don't do it, who else is going to fill that void? People are curious, people want the information, it's flowing at them. If you don't step forward, I feel like that can be, we know that that is filled by those who aren't experts. So I'd spend a lot of time explaining that this is we want you, the public wants you to tell us about your expertise, and in fact you are the expert in this.
I'm sure we have some medical professionals in the room. What is your message to them as a reporter that's trying to get out good information?
Trust your own expertise. You know, we often, I don't know if you have a chance to speak with the media or journalists. Sometimes we seem scary, but we're not. I'm pretty friendly. And we really want to help you get the best out there for the public. That's what I see my job is to get your expertise to folks who want to learn it as easy as possible. So you have to trust me a bit that I'm going to do it. I'm pretty good at my job. So when someone asks, can you share your expertise with me, have a conversation with them. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And then, know that you're the right person to say your truth or your expertise or your facts to the public.
Sam, I see you wanted to get in on this.
Yeah, I want to add that I don't think this is a failure on the part of scientists and medical professionals by any means, or even the health systems. I think it's a broader systemic failure that we don't have capacity for science communication. Being that like midpoint, that bridge, is a really specific skill. And I think us up here are some of the few, and I see some others in the room, who actually do this. And it's really hard to find proper infrastructure and support to do that. The resources don't exist. You'll see lots of funding for scientific research, as there should be, but there is no related funding for communicating that research, and it is too much of a burden to put on the side of the desks of scientists who have so much else going on. And there are many who are fantastic at it. Janet Rossent in the room is one of them, but she's got a lot of other stuff to do too, and she should have more resources for that kind of support, and it doesn't exist. So it's a bigger systemic failure.
And it's okay for you to be scared these days. I talk to researchers all the time who are terrified now to speak to Megan, not because they're afraid of her or being in that particular paper, but now if you speak out, you have all of these people who are going to potentially come back at you on social media. You might face so much pushback, where before you could give a quote and have an opinion and not be nervous. So I always think that we want people to do this, and I definitely want people to do this, but I understand and empathize if it's a fear that you have.
There's a personal toll for sure about being on the front lines of this. I want to ask though about the consequences of not speaking out. So when we are not putting out evidence-based evidence, if we're not putting that out there to the public, what are the consequences to an individual? Sam.
I think one of the big things is looking at trust, because one of the key components of trust is openness and integrity, and there's another one's benevolence. People want to know that those doing the research care, and by us not putting information out there, one, it looks like we don't care to interact with the people who could benefit from that work, and two, those people can't benefit from the work because they don't know it exists. And so I think in our funding structure in Canada for how science works, the people need to see a return on their investment in their tax dollars in funding science, and they need to know what information is out there. People are frustrated. There's no cure for cancer, and it seems like we haven't been working on it. We have. There are many things that have evolved, but if we don't let people know, it's very frustrating because they feel like, why are we funding science? Why are we wasting money? So the consequences are like for overall that trust, and then for people not having access to information.
So my pushback to that is, how much do we let people know? Because some of these things are in trials, you're trying to figure it out. Like, what is the adequate amount of information to get out there?
I think it's key because there's an overemphasis in broad media about single studies and reporting on every new study that comes out. And science really isn't about one single study, even if it's published in the best journal. It's about a consensus. And so what I would love to see is saying more, but on the more evergreen, big picture stuff. Like reporting on a review or a perspective piece instead of a new article, because that's telling you the big trends and the things that have been reproduced in science. And so I'd like to see more on those bigger things.
So Megan, what is the consequence to the health system when people turn away from evidence-based medicine?
Well, I think we've seen that play out over the last year, or sort of end in waves or from the pandemic, when people don't have trust in their healthcare system, when they can't easily access the healthcare system, when it's so lean and hard to get into, they are often forced or feel like they need to turn away to other sources of information, which can be really easy to find now online, as we talked about. We've got ChatGPT that can answer your question faster than your family doctor can pick up the phone. So I think when the health system can't communicate well because it's so tightly constrained by narrow resources, whether that's talking to your family doctor or having a science communicator share what's happening at one of these great institutions, people turn to where they can find information really easily, and then maybe it's not the best evidence.
Yeah, we have an example on our show which is about free birthing. Many people might have heard of this trend that is growing in Western countries where people are saying, I don't want any medical help to have a baby. That means no midwife, in extreme cases, no blood tests, no ultrasounds, like you're going in like totally natural, which if you're a healthy person, you might come out, but if there's an emergency, we are finding, stillbirths around the world, we are finding women that are dying. It is a really scary thing, but it comes down to, people like not having trust in that healthcare system.
Yeah.
What's the consequence, Krista, for public trust when we're not following evidence-based medicine?
Well, we see that all the time when we don't have trust. And I do want to point out too, it's people don't trust, but sometimes the people who are talking to us now aren't trustworthy. The reason measles is back isn't just because of medical misinformation coming from the internet. It's coming to us from all different sides. So I do want to put out that we definitely have a trust problem, but the trust problem is being led from many different sides. And when people don't trust, when they don't have that relationship with their healthcare provider anymore, that's a big one to me. I'm very lucky I have a healthcare provider I trust, but a lot of people don't. So it's very easy for them to get information in places that aren't necessarily vetted. When we have a healthy healthcare system where you don't have to worry about whether or not you can see a family physician, that's when we'll start to have more trust, because who do you trust more than the person you have a relationship with? And oftentimes on social media, especially, you create relationships in a parasocial way with someone who seems to be going through the same thing as you are. And so again, it is a trust problem.
It is a trust problem, and it sounds like we need more science communicators sometimes to fill that gap, especially when there's not always health professionals frontline. One of the areas of greatest dangers that I've noticed, is unproven stem cell treatments. So you've seen that clinics have exploded in the US especially. You've seen many Canadians going down there for treatment. Krista, why has the idea of stem cells as a miracle cure become so popular?
Because people really want help. I used to work at a stem cell research institute, and one of the things that happened was we would get calls from people who had heard about some cure or some treatment or therapy, and they really wanted to know why they couldn't find it in Canada, why they couldn't get it. And it wasn't because they just wanted a stem cell treatment. It was because they were in pain, or someone they loved was in pain, or someone they loved was dying. And they wanted to do whatever they could to help them. And so when they saw that this was available, or they heard online or saw someone talking about it, they wanted that because they're desperate and they're hurting. And they really are not looking for the facts, and they're not excited to hear why we don't have them here, because they're not safe, because they haven't been regulated, we need to do more testing, they might not work. That's not what you want to hear when someone you love is in pain. So that's a really big driver in why they're so popular.
It's so tricky, and I also find the way that they are marketed is a little shady, right? It's like, here's a spa, here's an anti-aging clinic. What should people be watching for, Sam?
If you're getting any kind of legitimate stem cell treatment in Canada, it should be in Canada, unless there's a really good reason why it isn't, from your doctor. And it should be at a major hospital, regardless where it is. It should be at a major, probably research-focused hospital. Right now, the only stem cell treatments that are approved in Canada and around the world have to do with a few different blood cancers, some other blood-related conditions like immune conditions like multiple sclerosis, and those are pretty intense. And so the risks will be discussed at length. And then other things could involve conditions related to the skin or the eye, and again, the risks will be discussed at length. If you're paying because they're saying it's experimental, that's a huge red flag. Typically, you don't have to pay to participate in clinical trials. So if it's not a skin, blood, or eye condition, and they're saying, well, it's experimental though, and they're making you pay, red flag.
Megan, anything that you would say to someone that's looking at these, like they're just seeing the ads?
Yeah, I agree with both the panelists here that they're really compelling because they're drawing on, they're hoping to find someone who is in pain or in distress and is going to offer them an open door when that door is sometimes closed for very good reasons in our healthcare system. I think what you could do is be like a reporter, as you would sometimes say, is stop looking at the internet and go to your phone and call someone and speak to a real person. That can be hard in our healthcare system, but go to the place where you can have an honest conversation, and that often should be your family doctor, to talk about the risks, the benefits, the possibilities. That's what I would suggest.
You know, one of the things about stem cells that's it's so interesting, right? There's promising treatments. There's so much in the works right now for heart disease, type 1 diabetes, kidney disease, right? In the future, there's a possibility we'll get there, but we're not there yet. Krista, how do we share exciting medical breakthroughs without overhyping the claims? Because I think this is part of the problem.
Well, as someone who at one point in my life was the person writing the press releases that you would see, it's a really tough, there's competing priorities, right? Because the person who's writing the media release about the research project really wants you to continue to fund the research. They want you to know that it is promising, that there's something moving forward that's really promising here. But what that turns into often is something that can be a little bit too hyped. I work a lot in diabetes, and I think every one of my friends with type 1 diabetes was told when they were diagnosed that they'd have a cure in 10 years. I gotta tell you, my PI is probably about 40 years away from when he was diagnosed, and he was told that. And stem cells do provide, right now, a really great bit of hope. But that's not going to happen necessarily tomorrow. So when we write these articles or when we write these press releases, we have to be really cautious about the language that we use and that we're not overhyping. I remember when there was a press conference during the Edmonton Protocol about how we had found the cure for diabetes, and that was held at the White House, and that was in the 1990s, I want to say. I'm probably wrong about the date. But we're always saying that there's just going to be a cure down the road, and that's really not great for the people that are hearing it.
The clinics, for example, in the States, you know, since 2021, they looked back 5 years and they saw a 4-fold increase in clinics, the majority of them in Florida, Texas, and California, so keep an eye out for that. What is the harm, Sam, that is being caused by these unproven stem cell clinics?
I think the fact that, well, even there are some in Canada where they are claiming to use your own cells, and so they get through on these little loopholes. The harm is that they're doing things that haven't been tested for safety, and you're either putting something that it could be not sterile because they're not going through proper regulations, or if they are actually putting in a stem cells, one of their defining characteristics, they love to divide. You know what else loves to divide? Cancer cells. This is one of the reasons why we are doing such careful studies on how to do cell-based and stem cell-based treatments, because there's that fine line between rebuilding whatever tissue is damaged and it going overboard and causing some kind of cancer or overgrowth. And so the scientists doing that, they know that balance. They're really good at figuring it out. But if some random person's just injecting all these cells into you, we don't know what they're gonna do, what they're gonna become, how much they're gonna grow. In all likelihood, they'll probably die and do nothing, but then you have all this random stuff in your body that, again, because they're not following any kind of ethics or protocol, could be harmful.
Just for some context, Pew found that from 2004 to 2020, at least 360 people were reportedly harmed by regenerative therapies not approved by the FDA. And take these in, okay? Several patients lost eyesight in degenerative conditions, brain inflammation, infections, fever, blood clots, disability, and even death. So this is serious stuff.
Can I add? One time someone called me. I don't know why I gave this stranger on the internet my number, but he called me. He was a dad. His young son, maybe 10, has autism, and he was taking him to Mexico to receive pig stem cell transplants, where they were injecting it into his spine. I don't even know what theoretical benefit that could have had. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I begged him, I was very kind, but please don't allow them to inject cells from another animal into your kid's spine, because he could have countless injuries from that. But I understand that he was a dad trying to do his best.
I wonder how this can happen. I mean, maybe now with the US is a different story, but I wonder how this can happen under the FDA's watch. Sam, like, how is this possible?
In that case, it was a case of medical tourism where he was leaving the country and going somewhere else. I think it was Mexico for a treatment. And in other cases, depending how the regulation works in that state or in that country, they might not have to go through. In Canada, stem cells are regulated as a pharmaceutical or biologic, and so they're regulated just like other medications like that are. And so they go through rigorous testing, but in other places they may not be, and especially if they're your own cells, there's loopholes.
Sam's kind of an expert on this, but I just want to know, are there any clinics like this in Canada?
The ones I see most commonly here are more like for aesthetics and stuff. Like there are a few places that will do like stem cell facials.
Don't really know what that means.
We're very lucky here, I will say, because we do have really strong regulations, and every now and then you'll start to see ads crop up for therapies, and they usually get tamped out in Canada very quickly. But Sam is right about the Mexico example, because a lot of times people have heard about something and they're going to do medical tourism, and they're going to go to this place because they can get that therapy there. And that country that they're going to might not have the same guardrails that we have here, and that can be a really risky thing. Because a lot of the people that called when I was working in the field were calling about a thing they had heard about where they were going to go somewhere else to get it.
We talked a little bit about social media and how, algorithms, influencers, and monetization factor in, to the amplification of pseudoscience. How should science communicators push back against that? Krista?
I get this question a lot, and I say to people, I am now a person who teaches science communicators, the next generation, the people that I hope will do a really good job about that. I accept that I'm a middle-aged lady and I am maybe not the best person, but I highly recommend to all of them that they listen to some of the work that's out here. Like, I want to hype, there's a podcast called America Dissected. They did a podcast episode called Does Public Health Need More Riz? I shouldn't say Riz because I am not a person who uses that word, but the answer is yes. And that's how we fight back. That's how we can make change, is that we start speaking to the people that we need to reach. And it can be really easy to get overwhelmed and to feel really stressed about all of this. I do all the time. But talking to trainees and talking to the next generation and realizing that, I'm not going to be able to figure out how we can fight against this maybe, but I think that next gen is going to do a really good job.
And Riz is charisma, for anyone that is Googling that right now. It's okay.
I too have to do that.
I think what I want to see is anyone in the room who, if you see something that enrages you and you know what message needs to get out to counter it, and it's a factual message, I would encourage you to get out there and do it, and do it in a way that feels authentic to you. Do it in the way that is how you would tell your friends. I think one of the big problems we have is that legacy science media historically has been very sterile. I have been told, if I wanted to be on a certain prestige television network, I couldn't do my makeup in the same way, I had to dress differently, I shouldn't talk the way that I talk, my hair should be back, all these things. Those are maybe minor, but it speaks to a larger thing where we're really making science and scientists seem one way, and that doesn't appeal to everyone. I don't relate to that version that they were trying to make me. And instead, I want to see people who look like the people in this room, who come with their own personality, their own side interests. Are you a dancer? Use dance to communicate what you want to dance. Use your sport, use whatever it is, use your language, if it's Riz or otherwise, and have that authentic kind of science communication, because that's the only way we're going to reach outside of echo chambers and reach the people who need to hear it.
Megan, is it harder to do your job?
With social media?
Yeah, you're on the health beat.
Yeah, but I was listening to my panelists and reflecting. I mean, if we're talking about, I mean, is the newspaper anything more, like we're the dinosaur of communicating. But what I'll say about the dinosaur, about what we have is, what the legacy media can do in the face of social media is be the place that people go to. So we know from the Toronto Star, if there's a snowstorm, you're not going to go to your influencer to figure out how to get to work, you go to the Toronto Star. During the pandemic, when there was so much was uncertain, I do think the Star and other media were really great at distilling what you needed to know, the day that you needed to know it, and what we didn't know yet. And I think that was something we learned, or I learned as a communicator during the pandemic. As much as it was important to explain what we did know, it was equally important to explain what we didn't know. And I think these are lessons that communicators have taken post-pandemic to look at the uncertainty as well. Not too long ago, stories came to me from my inbox or like my landline, which doesn't exist anymore. Now stories come in from readers who have questions about things that they're seeing online, something they've heard about. And so I think if you are a reader of the Star or other media, you'll see that we've moved away from those study stories where maybe 10 years ago we said, a new study by Sick Kids shows this. We sometimes do that, but oftentimes what we do is react to what we know others are seeing online. So the headline may now be, you might have seen fiber maxing is the next best thing. Here's what you need to know. And that's where our reporters go and speak to the experts to break down what the phrase is, what the evidence is, what the uncertainties are, and what you might want to know going forward. So I think we are trying to, as a legacy media, take some lessons from social media and reflect what people are seeing out there back to them in an evidence-based form.
I love the I don't know. My team talks about it a lot. It's like, how do we get at the context and nuance and actually say, I don't know? It's hard as a journalist to say that or be like, we just don't know enough about this, but I think we need to do that more for the public so they don't feel like it's so black and white. I want to ask quickly about, people have seen deepfake doctors online. So real doctors that exist in Canada that are being deepfaked and their videos are being put out selling products or suggesting non-evidence-based medicine. It's super concerning and they look pretty good. Anybody have any tells about how to spot the fakes?
They're so good now. My mom almost fell for one the other day because she knows I know Theresa Tam and that I'm a big fan of Dr. Theresa Tam's work. And she was like, something in her spidey sense obviously tingled because before she put her credit card down, she was like, now that Theresa Tam is leaving government and she's selling arthritis cures, is it okay to buy? And my mom's in pain from her arthritis. So again, that's who's being taken in by that. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Theresa Tam is not selling you arthritis supplements on the internet, but they're so good. And that's scary. I have one of my colleagues who has a disclaimer on her email now saying, that's not me. If you're contacting me about that thing, it's not me. And so I don't know the answer to this, but when my mom almost fell for it, who has me, who she can double check things with, it scared me. I won't lie.
I have an Instagram video in drafts right now of me talking like this to say now to be trusted online, you need to always show your hands because Gen AI is really bad at hands, especially when they're moving. So I'm like, should we do this thing where if you're real, you just show your hand?
But it's wild. Even the latest stuff is beating that.
Yeah,
our show is dives deep
it's
into
already
the AI stuff.
outdated,
It's beyond that. And so a lot of times on our show, the experts are telling us literally stop the video and watch it in increments, see if the things around the main person on the screen are moving in a weird way. If things are all of a sudden appearing that weren't there before, but you have to almost stop it. And most people are not going to do that scrolling on their phone. But it's something to be cognizant of.
And maybe I should show my pores more. That I don't look too smooth. Look, I'm real.
For all of you on the panel, there's constantly a battle about who bears responsibility for medical misinfo, right? Government, media, big tech. There's so many people we could blame. But I want us to think about the solutions. What would rebuilding trust in evidence-based medicine actually look like? How do we rebuild trust? Let's start on that side.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in. I'm sure there's lots of different ways, and people in this room I know are probably thinking about it too. But two that come to mind that I've seen in my reporting is having institutions that people trust, like Sick Kids and Scarborough Health Network. They've opened up phone lines where people can call and talk to a medical professional. So you don't have to go through the usual pathway into the healthcare system. You can go to the institutions that people, the names that they trust, and be able to call a number and talk to a healthcare professional. So Scarborough Health Network, they have a number you can call, talk to a doctor, talk to a nurse, if I get it right. You can ask about vaccines, you can ask about diabetes care. It's like they translate into every language that we know we need to translate to in here in the GTA. And I think those kinds of solutions, amongst many others, will help people rebuild their trust. They can ask the people that they can ask the experts in the institutions in their community that they trust. And it just makes that getting the answer that they want because they're in pain or worried or distressed that much easier. So that's one of the solutions I've seen in my work that I'm really encouraged by.
Talk to real people. How do we build trust?
I'll build on that and say talk to real people, and that we need to see more real people talking about science. I see journalists as like the really start of the funnel, giving us quality information, and then we need people to be taking that information that's well researched and evidence-based and putting it in their own words and in the words of their communities. So I co-founded an organization called Science is a Drag. We talk about science in drag because drags are leaders in queer communities, and we know that that resonates, and that's the way that we like to talk about serious topics in our communities. And so I think those types of authentic forms and representative forms of sharing science are needed because there's no one solution. It's going to be many different.
Unlocking new spaces. Okay.
And first of all, shout out for Science is a Drag, it's awesome. But I really think that one of the things that we need to start talking about is the guardrails. There are no guardrails on the internet. If you are someone who is selling a pharmacological product, if you are selling me a medicine that's going to be available in a pharmacy, there are guardrails. And if you break those rules, there are consequences. There are no consequences on the internet for selling me magic beans or trying to, sell me whatever. It would not be very hard for governments, I don't think, as a person on the sidelines, to implement similar rules. And I think that a lot of times it would save people a lot of money, a lot of heartache, and potentially some health issues if they didn't have such access.
Amazing. Thank you so much to our panelists. Give them a round of applause, folks.